The American Southwest in the 1850s was a vast, unforgiving barrier. The United States had recently acquired millions of square acres of new territory following the Mexican-American War, stretching from Texas to California. But holding on to it was a logistical nightmare. The terrain was dominated by scorching deserts, jagged mountain ranges, and practically non-existent water sources. For the U.S. military, traditional pack animals, horses, mules, and oxen, were failing miserably. They succumbed to dehydration, broke down on the rocky soil, and required massive amounts of forage that the desert simply couldn't provide. Westward expansion, border security, and transcontinental communication were grinding to a halt. Then, a remarkably unconventional solution was proposed. If the American West looked like the deserts of the Middle East and North Africa, why not use the animals that had mastered those terrains for millennia? Why not import camels? The idea wasn't entirely new, but it found its ultimate champion in Jefferson Davis, who served as the U.S. Secretary of War in the mid-1850s. Davis was deeply focused on finding a reliable way to transport military supplies and protect westward routes. After years of lobbying a skeptical Congress, he finally secured a $30,000 appropriation in 1855 for what would officially be known as the Camel Military Experiment. To execute the plan, the Navy stores ship USS Supply, commanded by Lieutenant David Dixon Porter, was dispatched across the Atlantic. Porter sailed to major Mediterranean and Middle Eastern ports, including Istanbul, Cairo, and Smyrna. He took his mission incredibly seriously, even studying camel anatomy and veterinary care during the voyage. The crew ultimately purchased a mix of single-humped Arabian dromedaries, built for speed and heat, and two-humped Bactrian camels, built for heavy loads and colder mountain climates. In total, the first shipment consisted of 33 camels, along with several native drivers hired to teach American soldiers how to handle these notoriously stubborn animals. The voyage back across the Atlantic was a bizarre chapter in naval history. Porter had custom decks constructed to keep the camels stable during rough seas. Remarkably, only one camel died during the grueling journey, and 6 calves were born at sea, meaning the expedition actually arrived in Texas with more camels than they started with. In May of 1856, the USS Supply unloaded its exotic cargo at Indianola, Texas. The sight of these towering, strange creatures walking through the coastal mud caused an immediate sensation. Locals stared in disbelief, and local horses and mules reportedly bolted in sheer terror at the scent of the strange beasts. The camels were marched inland to Camp Verde, a newly established military post just north of San Antonio, which would serve as the official headquarters for the U.S. Camel Corps. A second expedition a year later brought another 41 camels, bringing the herd to over 70. Initially, the American soldiers despised their new assignments. Camels didn't behave like horses. They bit, they kicked, they spit foul-smelling gastric juices when irritated, and they possessed an aggressive deep bellow that kept the camp awake. Furthermore, American packing techniques didn't work on camel humps, requiring the soldiers to learn entirely new methods of securing cargo. But the camels were about to prove their worth on one of the most grueling survey expeditions in American history. In 1857, Lieutenant Edward Fitzgerald Beale was tasked with charting a 1,000-mile wagon road from Fort Defiance, New Mexico, to the Colorado River at the California border, a route that would later become part of the iconic Route 66. Davis insisted that Beale take 25 of the Camp Verde camels along to test their capabilities in the field. Beale started the journey as a skeptic, but he returned a passionate convert. As the expedition pushed into the brutal, waterless stretches of Arizona, the horses and mules began to falter and collapse from exhaustion. The camels, however, thrived. They carried loads weighing up to 700 pounds each, marched effortlessly through loose sand and sharp volcanic rock, and went days at a time without a single drop of water. When the expedition encountered steep mountain ranges, the camels surprised everyone by climbing rocky slopes that mules couldn't navigate. When forage ran low, they happily ate greasewood, mesquite, and prickly shrubs that other pack animals refused to touch. Beale noted in his official journals that a single camel was worth 4 of his best mules. He recorded instances where the camels went 6 days without water in blistering heat, showing no signs of distress, while the mules had to be sent back miles to the last known watering hole. The experiment was an undeniable tactical success. The camels had proven they could revolutionize transit, supply lines, and communication across the American West. So, why aren't there camel crossing signs all over the highways of New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas today? The answer lies in timing and politics. Just as the Camel Corps was proving its utility, the United States was fracturing. In 1861, the American Civil War broke out. The nation's attention, budget, and military manpower were instantly diverted away from Western frontier experimentation and poured into a brutal internal conflict. Camp Verde was captured by Confederate forces early in the war. The Confederacy had little use for the camels, using a few to haul cotton, but largely neglecting the herd. Meanwhile, the camels stationed in California were left tied up at regular outposts, their specialized skills completely ignored by a military focused on conventional warfare in the East. Furthermore, the post-war landscape changed at an astonishing pace. The completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869, combined with the rapid expansion of telegraph lines, suddenly solved the very communication and transportation crises that the camels had been imported to fix. The iron horse replaced the need for the desert beast. Following the war, the U.S. government decided to completely liquidate the project. In 1866, the remaining camels at Camp Verde were sold at auction to circus owners, ranchers, and mining companies for a fraction of their original cost. Some were used to haul salt and ore in Nevada and Utah, but civilian handlers lacked the patience and specialized knowledge required to manage them. Slowly, many of the animals were simply turned loose into the wild or escaped into the vast expanses of the Southwest. For decades afterward, ghost-like stories echoed across the desert. Railway workers, miners, and indigenous tribes reported spotting wild camels wandering the tracking flats of Arizona and the deep canyons of New Mexico. The most famous piece of folklore to emerge was the legend of the Red Ghost, a massive feral red camel rumored to carry a dead human skeleton strapped to its back, which terrorized isolated ranches in Arizona during the 1880s. Slowly, the wild population dwindled. The last confirmed sighting of an original, wild-born American camel occurred in Arizona in the early 1900s. The Great Camel Experiment remains one of the most fascinating what-ifs in American military history, a brilliant, highly successful logistical solution that was ultimately erased by the chaos of war and the unstoppable march of technology. The desert has a way of swallowing history whole, leaving only dust and folklore in its wake. But beneath the layers of time, the hoofprints of the Camel Corps still linger as a testament to an era when no idea was too wild and no frontier too vast. If you enjoyed uncovering this forgotten chapter of the American West, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to Legend and Lore, and drop a comment below. Would you have ridden a camel across the Mojave? Until next time, keep exploring.